Franken Friday.
In the 90s, after all the new faces of horror like Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger all had their run, it was time to bring back the classics. This is when producer-director Francis Ford Coppola gave us a double package, Bram Stoker's Dracula and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It was an attempt to more faithfully bring the pages of the novels to the screen, although they both invented a lot of wacky stuff. I already reviewed Bram Stoker's Dracula a couple years back. You can't do one without the other, so here it is, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Coppola produced, but this time the directing duties were turned over to Kenneth Branagh, who also stars in the film as Victor Frankenstein. Also, executive producer Fred Fuchs is back. Good old Fred Fuchs. Frank Darabont wrote the script, and supposedly he hated the final result. He said it was the best script he ever wrote, but the worst movie he ever saw. The question is, what would Mary Shelley think? If you're going to put the author's name on it, you better stick damn close to it. There's no way they can come back and tell you if they'd agree or not. Yes, for the most part, it does follow the book pretty closely, but there are some major differences. The biggest one I'll get to. The plot. I don't think I need to explain. It's Frankenstein, okay? It pays some tribute to the classic 1931 version, more proof how that movie is so famous that even when they're trying to stick to the book, they can't ignore it. For example, Frankenstein has to find a brain for his creation, just like the scene in the original where Fritz has to steal a brain from a science class. Also, they use the famous line, "It's alive," which originated in the classic film. The creation scene is interesting. Every film version has to make up its own because in the novel, the way in which Frankenstein actually makes the monster is kept vague. Here, he's running shirtless through the lab as the camera is whipping all over the place. He's using electric eels. There's a giant scrotum on the ceiling. I don't know what's going on. The makeup on the monster is good. He looks like somebody who's really been stitched together. In the close-ups, you can see both his eyes are different colors, as if they've been taken from two different people. I thought that was interesting. The monster, of course, is played by Robert De Niro. Might seem like an odd casting choice, but he did a good job. He probably has some of the most subtle acting in the whole film, when everyone else is so stagey and over the top, including Branagh. Of course, he does have his big moments, like that scene that was in the trailers and commercials when he's standing in front of the burning house and he turns to face the camera and says, "I will have my revenge, Frankenstein!" Speaking of revenge, I never really bought it. Sure, Frankenstein does not think of his consequences, he takes no responsibility after creating the monster, but the way it plays off, it's not like he really abandoned the monster. It seems more like he thought the monster was dead. It just doesn't seem like a strong enough rejection for the monster to actually comprehend that and then instantly want revenge. Sometimes the monster is really sympathetic, the way he should be, but then he's ripping out fucking hearts. There's a part where he's sitting with Frankenstein in a cave of ice and they're having a civilized conversation, and the monster tells Frankenstein how he killed his brother. It's very blunt. He just says, "I picked him up and crushed his throat," and he's being so mean about it, and Frankenstein, who's been so melodramatic the rest of the film, just sits there and takes it, and then they carry on having a normal conversation. This was a chance for De Niro to have the role of a lifetime, but his talents were harmed by a tonally inconsistent script. At the same time, I just wish they cast somebody lesser known because De Niro is such a high-profile actor and so recognizable. Anyway, the biggest difference from the novel, at least the biggest difference that stuck out to me, in the novel, Frankenstein creates a bride for the monster, but right before he gives it life, he changes his mind and destroys it. In this one, after the monster kills Frankenstein's wife, this time by ripping her heart out like a Mortal Kombat fatality, Frankenstein goes crazy, carries her corpse to his lab, and reanimates her. So this film not only draws from the classic, it draws from Frankenhooker. He even has to use her head on a different body, just like in Frankenhooker. When he brings her back to life, she looks horrible. There's parts of her head missing, one eye is kind of stitched over. Then he starts dancing with her. She's laying limp in his arms as he spins her around and around, and her head just keeps leaning over as if it's barely attached. But Frankenstein is so helplessly optimistic about it. He keeps begging her to say his name. It makes Frankenstein out to be really sad and pathetic, which I think could have been a great direction if the rest of the film was more consistent. Then the monster shows up and wants the bride for himself, and the two of them literally tug a war over her. I almost thought the stitches were going to come apart and she'd rip in two. That would be one hell of an ending, like a Looney Tunes finale. Then she runs from them both, and without any words, by doing this, she expresses everything you need to know right before lighting herself on fire and committing suicide. It's a very disturbing scene, so disturbing to me, it's the highlight. After 20 years, still, that's the best part that I remember, and it has nothing to do with the book. Sometimes movies are best when they make up their own stuff, because books and movies are two totally different mediums. I just don't think they should have called it Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I'm not exactly sure what this movie is trying to be. I feel very mixed about it. I'm one of few people who remembers the made-for-TV version of Frankenstein that predated the Branagh version. It aired on TNT on June 13th, 1993, and was later released on VHS. It had a much lower budget, and for the budget, I think they did a better job. It's a shame this one is so overlooked. This one also tried very hard to emulate Mary Shelley, and I think it's debatable which one got it right.